Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and I want to talk about narrative overshoot. So here's the question, right? So you and I are dungeon masters, and we have a responsibility to bring forward a story that is exciting and that our players can learn from, and that is not fundamentally offensive to them, right? And that they can handle, right? Now, what's really interesting is Dungeons & Dragons has started to deal with safety tools, right? And that's interesting. I have very mixed feelings on safety tools. I absolutely... So let me be super clear. So basically what we're talking about is how do we avoid the overshoot that the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 put into their content? And let me define that overshoot. So Guardians of the Galaxy 3 has a huge problem sitting right in the center of it. Okay, what is that problem? Well, that problem is animal cruelty. So the movie actually shows three animals: Rocket, Lila, Teefs, and Floor, and that is a raccoon, Lila is an ocelot, or an otter. I think she's an ocelot. Okay. Next is a walrus, and then a bunny, and it shows them tortured. What's even more horrific about the situation is they don't even know they're being tortured. They don't know that what's happening to them is wrong, and it's just so evil and so horrific that many people went and saw the movie and like, I'm not watching that again. And boy, I'll tell you, I get it. I don't know. You know what? I'll tell you right now. I doubt I will see Guardians of the Galaxy 3 again. I really liked it. I liked it a lot. But I love. It's kind of odd. I don't own any pets, right? And actually, I don't own any pets because I know that owning a pet is a major commitment. It's a massive commitment, and honestly, I don't really understand pets because I feel like you get like 90% of the responsibility of having a child with a pet, and for what? Like, to pet it and smile a few times? Like, it doesn't seem like a good return on investment. And I don't mean money, I mean time, right? So to me, pets just don't seem like a good return on investment on time, right? But I also, one of the things is I would never want to get a pet and then not do everything necessary to serve that pet and keep good care of it, right? So that's one of the reasons why I don't get a pet is like, I don't want to get super committed to something that's going to take a lot of upkeep, right? Like with that, I don't have like a burning love for, and so that's kind of my take, right? So I'm careful about not getting pets because I want to make sure, because I'm not, that's a whole personal thing. But I love animals, and I don't want to see animals harmed, right? And this movie, like, legit shows a whole bunch of animal harm, like, a lot, right? Like, it even gets to the point where you're like, oh my gosh, Rocket's got a bunch of metal in him. And, like, that's not cool. Like, he's still being tortured. I think there's parts in his body that don't belong there from when he was tortured before, which means his torture is still continuing, right? Like, so, like, Rocket, even when he's with the Guardians of the Galaxy, is still like being tortured just by the objects that are in his body, right? It's bad. It's very, very bad, and it's an overshoot. It's a narrative overshoot. So that's the point, right? And actually, it's a major mistake, and the reason why is it's almost a certainty that Guardians of the Galaxy 3 will not receive $1 billion, will not make $1 billion, and the reason why is people don't want to go and rewatch animal cruelty again and again and again, right? People are like, you're like, I saw that movie, it was kind of cool, like there was good action scenes, but so the entire point is you don't want to have a narrative overshoot, right? You want to make sure that the people who are involved in your game want to retell those stories, right? So that their lives are transformed and the cultures they live in are transformed, exactly like Joe Manganiello said, right? The point of Dungeons and Dragons, right? Certainly not fun. We know that now, right? So basically, so how do we avoid this narrative overshoot? So how would James Gunn have avoided this narrative oversheet? Well, first of all, he was horribly unfair to these NPCs. And that's the first thing I want you to do as a dungeon master, is never, ever, 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 ever use the term NPC within your group, right? As a commentator, I still have to use it because you guys don't know what entities are, right? So within my Dungeons & Dragons, I refer to characters and entities. Player characters. Everything that I control is not a non-player character. They're an entity. They're an entity. Anything that has a speaking line in my Dungeons & Dragons is an entity, right? And so James Gunn was horribly... Now, the characters in Guardians of the Galaxy, Rocket Raccoon is a character, right? He's a main character. And he's going to get treated fairly, right? Because he has to. He's got at minimum, he's got plot armor, right? But Lila, Teefs, and Floor, these entities were treated horribly by James Gunn. And the reason why is he put them in that movie, he tortured them throughout the entire story, and then he killed them. They all died, right? Like, that's absurd, right? Not only did they live lives of torture, but then they died. And the whole point was just to make Rocket Raccoon's backstory sad, right? That's not cool, man. Like, an entity deserves... It can't be throwaway for the purpose of the main characters. That is bad. Do not do this in your games. Make sure that your player characters are... Your entities are not there to simply make the lives of the player characters sad or even happy. They need to have a purpose of their own, right? And so that was one, is he used these entities just to make Rocket's backstory sad, and that is horrible, and it's bad, and I kind of feel like James Gunn deserves to not have this movie make $1 billion because he was so lazy with the entity processing here, right? The other one that we have to think about is, and I love Gary Gygax's work so much, because why do you think Dungeons & Dragons is progressive and woke, right? Do you think they're doing it for fun? Do you think it's there because they just want to, like, be woke? It's not, right? Like, they're trying to... Dungeons & Dragons is a 4 quarters project, right? It means it's good for families, it's good for young people, it's good for old people, it's good for men, it's good for women. It's a public utility, right? Like, this isn't like, Blades in the Dark, right? Blades in the Dark was made for super niche. That product was not made to appeal to the masses, right? But Dungeons & Dragons is. It's made to appeal to the broadest audience in all of tabletop role-playing games. It's the McDonald's of tabletop role-playing games. You're like, oh, Scott, McDonald's food sucks. You're wrong, right? It's incredibly important. Millions of families, right, when they were poor and when they're rich, right, can take their family, take their wife, a husband can take his wife and his 3 kids and take them to McDonald's. Everybody gets a burger. Everybody gets, chicken McNuggets. Everybody gets fries. Everybody gets a cold drink, and they get out there for less than $20, right? And that's important. That is important. Like, how dare anyone tear that down and say it's common and mundane, right? McDonald's is powerful. They have transformed the entire industry of food, right? And that's the point, right? Is your little scrub OSR game, your little scrub indie game, they're not holding weight, man. They're not doing work for an entire culture, right? For an entire industry. And Dungeons & Dragons does, right? So one of the reasons, so this is the other one, is James Gunn should have known, man. Like, animal cruelty is a third rail. You cannot touch it today, right? And this is the point. We within Dungeons & Dragons, we are on the progressive edge because we are on the edge of culture, right? We are the most intelligent, the most charismatic, the most confident people in America, and thus the world, right? By default, right? And we are on the edge of these issues, and we are doing it so that we can know what's right, what's now, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, right? And that's the point, is like James Gunn, like, and that's the other thing, is you get powerful and you don't take notes and you're not listening, but he should have known animal cruelty is off the board, right? And you need to be aware what is off the board to your players. And you don't find it out by asking them, right? You don't sit down and have a little session 0 and make a list of all the things you can't put in. You have to know your players, right? And you have to look for signals, and you also have to pay attention to life, right? Like, it wasn't some big mystery that people despise animal cruelty today, right? It's just basic human decency, right? You have to understand basic human decency. And that's my entire point, is we have reached a point where we have got to where you have to process basic human decency, right? Like, it's very important. Like, we've reached a point where we have to be aware of where humans are as a culture, right? And that we cannot, we have to understand ourselves, right? And as a dungeon master, you should understand social cues at the societal level, right? Every single word of that is my humble opinion, and that's how you avoid a narrative overshoot. And how do you avoid a narrative overshoot? You realize it can happen, and you take steps to avoid it. Just being aware. And that's why I appreciate that you listen to my channel. I talk about every possible end that I can talk about with Dungeons & Dragons, because I want to make it powerful, and I want to cover everything, right? What am I missing? I'd love to hear you. Let me know the topics you would like to hear more of. Wait, I'm sorry. I shouldn't ask that, because I have hundreds of literally 100, 200 video ideas. And so I apologize. I'm going to retract that. I'm no longer in the requests game. I have just so many ideas that I can't possibly get to. I used to say, hey, what do you guys want to hear? And I'm just no longer there. And I thank you for your patience. And be careful of the narrative overshoot. Don't let your story become repugnant to people. And I think that's what James Gunn did. This is a narrative overshoot. Make sure you don't do it in your Dungeons & Dragons campaign. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.